What are you building?
We keep your packages safe right at your doorstep.
I'd probably leave it out of my pitch.
Okay.
That's an easy way to pass on something.
The entire country of America has this problem.
But is that why you're answering that way?
I think I almost blanked out, so thank you for the blank.
You can only sell so many widgets or so many items. That may be a big enough business to back anyway, but you need to help me understand how big that opportunity is.
Let me welcome everybody, if you haven't been before, to the offices of Free Agency and to the feedback loop. Who's been before to the feedback loop? Raise your hand.
It's a beautiful space you have
Thank
here.
you very much. Thank you very much.
And such an amazing setup to do this in.
I appreciate it. Well, and the thing I love, only a handful and a half of hands went up, and so mostly newcomers.
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad. Who learned about it from Luma? I feel like most people just find it on Luma. And then shout the next thing someone learned it from. A newsletter? Gary's Guide. Cool. Instagram, awesome. Who's Instagram? Was it just on your feed?
Yeah, a friend of mine is here.
Fantastic, love that. Anyone else?
Love Gary's guy.
Yeah, right?
Love
this is
Gary.
classic in New York and in tech. I've never met Gary.
Gary's wonderful.
Can you introduce me to Gary?
Yeah.
I want to meet the Gary.
Yeah, Gary's amazing. He's been around forever.
Exactly. New York tech has a lot to give to Gary. Free Agency, for those who don't know it, we're a venture-backed startup ourselves. I'm Sherveen. I'm the founder and CEO. We provide Hollywood-style representation to tech talent. That means a variety of job search and career services aimed at professionals who work in the industry, but that's the only shilling I'll do for now. I'm an occasional angel investor, but in tonight's context, most importantly, the host of the feedback loop. Every week, we come together, most weeks, we come together and a batch of startup founders gets up on stage and gives their 1-minute pitch and then gets feedback from me and a guest venture investor. The whole point is not for them to raise a check on stage. Although, Jesse, if you brought your checkbook.
I haven't written a real check in a while in your company, but I can still commit.
Were some of your first angel investments checks?
Oh, yeah. Actually, my very first angel investor that ever wrote a check into my first company showed up with a check, and I left it in my pocket for a weekend, and I went to the bank to deposit it, and they called him. They didn't believe me. They legitimately called his bank.
Was it your personal account? Is that why? Or?
No, it was going to a business account. They were just who's going to give you a $50,000 check? I was like, I swear he meant to do it. Well,
things have changed since then.
Yeah.
But the whole idea, again, not being the check, but instead of being feedback on their pitch and their storytelling, because even the best of founders, they're held back, whether it's in the recruiting motion, the hiring, that's the recruiting motion, the recruiting and hiring motion, the sales motion for their product, or the fundraising motion, by the core essence of their storing ability and their ability to concisely convince, persuade, and give context to others. And so hopefully the founders that get up on stage get a bunch of context from us. And I want to introduce you as general partner at Flybridge, but more importantly and interestingly, I have questions about your time at WeWork, a founding team member there. You've been in the venture ecosystem as an investor, sounds like also as a founder. Want to hear a little bit of that story too. But give us the more depthful version of yourself. Who are you?
Yeah, so we were talking just before this. I'm probably most importantly a father of 2 children here in New York, raising them in New York City.
Yeah.
Which is a choice.
Yeah.
I did not grow up in New York, but I've been here for 15 years. So I consider myself as much of a New Yorker as I can be. I'm like a naturalized citizen here.
It definitely counts.
And so raising my kids here, and very excited about that. But yeah, I started my career as an engineer. I was a network security engineer. I worked for a bunch of different companies traveling the globe. I was 19 years old and somebody was crazy enough to give me a company credit card and renew my passport because I'd been out of the country once when I was 13 and send me to Hong Kong to go work on some stuff. And I had an amazing time and probably too amazing of a time while I was there. And sort of took that engineering role into heading up technology for a company here in New York called LivePerson, which at the time was a public company, still is a public company. It was already public. And I came there to run technology for them. Again, crazy enough, I was 22, turning 23 at the time, and I was an executive at a publicly held company traded on the NASDAQ.
At that time, was their only option for a technology group, a 22-year-old? Is that how that was?
That's what it seemed like. I wasn't really. But look, they wanted next generation, new age thinking, whatever. I lasted 2 years. To be fair, it was not for me. I was probably not for them. One of the worst reasons to start a company is because you want to start a company. You should have some other idea, but that's why I did it. I wanted to start a company. And so I left and I started a company with a friend of mine and was here in New York Tech. And this was, 13, 14 years ago. The New York Tech meetup was a few hundred people every month that would get together. Gary's Guide was big then. That's probably how I found out about New York Tech. I'm not actually sure. And And it was really interesting because I got to know a bunch of these VCs, not because of the venture world or the tech world, but I ran tech for a public company.
Right.
So we were headquartered in New York. There weren't many public companies in New York headquartered that were technology businesses. You moved to San Francisco. So I had all these B2B VCs, the people that wanted to invest in enterprise tech would show up and say, hey, I want to talk to you about our companies. They're building in New York. You're the poster child for building a company in New York. And that was fun, but I didn't know what I was doing. And so I left LivePerson, I started a startup, and I happened to meet, you asked about WeWork, I happened to meet Adam and Miguel because of a Craigslist ad. And
for
nothing too nefarious.
Okay.
It was not about juggling or anything like that. No, I was looking for office space we had a few other friends who were all starting companies at the same time, including my best friend, Matt. And we were looking to find a space to work together. Co-working was a thing in New York. There were a couple of places open, but we kind of wanted something a little bit different, a little more intimate. We needed a little bit of office space, and we thought. And so we showed up at Grand and Lafayette, the very first floor, the very first WeWork building that had ever been open, and met with Adam. And what was supposed to be a 20-minute tour turned into a few-hour endeavor, wandering around the neighborhood, and then eventually ending up in a conference room drinking a bottle of tequila. As people may know from all of the books, that was a common occurrence.
And
the show and the movies and the whatever. I actually haven't watched most of it, so you'll have to clue me in.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting moment because Matt and I wanted to find space for friends of ours. And Adam said, look, we're opening this very second floor. Why don't we create a space together? You invite your friends in. And in return, we'll give them a deal, and all we're asking is that they help us learn about interesting technology that's changing the sort of way of work.
Wow.
That was his vision at the time. That became a side project. And it's funny for me to look back on it because this was 2010, and to think about my journey with WeWork started as a side project, and was very fortunate that started to grow, and that startup that I started because I wanted to start a startup, which is, again, the worst reason to start a startup, did not flourish in the same way. And so in 2011, we decided to sort of brand it as WeWork Labs and to roll it into the business of WeWork entirely and join the company. So when we first got involved, there were 4 or 5 employees. By the time I left in 2016, we were almost 4,000 people. And there's a lot of stories we could talk about. I don't know what direction you or this audience wants to go in.
Well, I have so many questions such that, usually between the pitches with founders, we'll talk about their industry or maybe what we heard. I think we're going to wind up talking a lot about Adam Newman in between, if you don't mind. Well, with that in mind, crowd, are you ready for the feedback loop and to welcome founder number 1? Let's do a round of applause. Founder number 1, come on up. Tell us your name.
Jovan.
Jovan, you have a minute. Are you ready to tell us about what you're building?
Yes, 100%.
Go ahead, tell us. What are you building?
So I'm working on Jigsaw Stack. We fine-tune models to solve a lot of the heavy lifting for backend engineers. The issue is I've been a backend engineer for the past 10 years of my life. And one thing that we realized is that we spend most of the time maintaining code rather than writing product code. So for example, if you want to scrape a website, you write a piece of code that breaks every single week because that website changes its layout or new security rules come in. We built models specifically for that use case to fully automate scraping for you, for example. So you give a URL and you write price and it automatically goes in, figures out how the website works and pulls it out for you. We do that across the other heavy lifting tasks like OCR, translation, and a bunch of different things. We bundle all of these models that we built into a single AI SDK that backend engineers can plug into their backend and power different aspects of their backend. So now 90% of the work is done. All they have to do is basically direct the direction of that model and how they want to utilize it so that they can focus on building better products rather
That's
than...
a minute.
Yeah.
Give a round of applause.
Cool.
That is very hard to do in a minute.
A minute pitch never happens in the real world of venture and
They
startups.
call it an elevator pitch. I've only ever been pitched successfully once in an elevator.
Was it Adam Newman?
It was not Adam. He couldn't have done that.
Wow. So it's interesting. There's a lot of questions I have. Most of them center around the same thing, which is like how much of this is an automated product in a backend doing work versus a Copilot or something that is being used in conjunction with real world programmers. So what maybe get into the UX of it a bit. When someone's literally using Jigsaw Stack, how does that feel to them?
Let me give you a comparison on how typically they would use it. So right now, if you want to scrape a website, you would install something like Puppeteer, a tool, and then you write a bunch of code. You need to understand how that specific website works, go into that, understand the CSS selector, write a bunch of code. Now, let's say you try to scrape Amazon.com. tomorrow they change the layout slightly, the entire thing that you wrote breaks. How they would use Jigsaw Stack instead, it's a single line of code. You write the URL of the website and you prompt, like you would prompt a model to say, hey, give me the prices. And now all that work that I just described, what a developer would do, is fully automated by the model. So the model learns the website in real time and figures out where I should pull out the information for you as a developer and gives you structured data that you can use in your backend without having to rewrite that code. So it's consistency that is the key, because now developers typically would expect that kind of output from this model that they can plug into any aspect of their engine.
But I guess, is the model sitting in my backend and servicing, let's say, my database, or is the model one-off that I'm talking to for the purposes of scraping?
Yeah, so it's an API. Basically, it's a one-off for that
cloud,
specifically.
yeah,
We run it. We had the infrastructure.
What was your background before this?
So I've been working in different companies as a head of technology or as a CTO. So I've worked in healthcare companies. I graduated or started as a game developer in the AI space. So I used to build games back in the day, and then jumped around startups and started my own company, which I sold 2 years ago. And now I'm running Jigsaw Stack. Yeah.
Got it. And so when you think about the sort of lay of the land, you mentioned using something like Puppeteer, let's say, but others in this category, to me, it feels like, and forgive me for the...
Go ahead. No,
VCs are really good about like, with just like X for Y is like an easy thing. So this is sort of a Twilio-like experience, like what Twilio did for texting and phone calls, you're doing for sort of all of these
You could say
automations.
to a point. I would think of us more like a Stripe, like what Stripe did for payments, we're doing for the backend engineer world when it comes to a lot of the tasks that they typically do.
And so how broad do those, one of the questions I was going to get to is how broad do those tasks have
Amazing.
to be?
Yeah, I love the question. So basically we interviewed thousands of developers and we found like the top 10 things that they typically face. Number 1 is always scraping. Number 2 is OCR. Number 3 was translation. And the list goes on. So there's a few other things that we built specifically for each one and power them into a single module.
Got it.
Yeah.
And your model, how are you training and how are you using the customer's data or not when it comes to that?
So it was painful at the start because the typical approach for most engineers is take an LLM, build a wrapper around it, and throw the data. The thing is with LLMs, it's not good. It's in the name, right? Large language model.
Yeah.
It's good for language tasks, but when you give it structured data or to automate a certain process, it sucks.
Sure.
And that's when we had to kind of build our own. So we kind of manually created a lot of the data for specific websites, tagged it, anonymized it, trained our model. Now, since we have a pipeline of users using us, so we have around 38,000 active developers using us right now.
38,000?
3,000.
3,000.
Yeah, active developers using us, and with around 5 million API requests every month. So with that data, we anonymize as much as we can.
Yeah.
And then we use that to tag, train, and build a better model as we scale.
And things like HIPAA, SOX, all that stuff, you're
Right now, we're
compliant.
getting our SOC 2. So we're pretty early. We've been here for 6 months. We got our SOC. We're getting our SOC 2. HEPA is on the way. It's a bit more challenging, but we're getting there. Yeah.
Got it.
But this is for, I just want to clarify again in my head, maybe I got lost in your pitch a little bit about this. From a backend developer perspective, you're talking about one-off backend developer tasks that are more like things like scripts, things like atomized moments in time versus backend infrastructure.
Yes, it's not backend infrastructure like a database, but it's scripts mostly.
I think this is where, so to get some pitch feedback, because I think the concept makes a ton of sense, fine-tuned model that takes, a lot of these tasks that actually extract a lot of time from developers who could be doing more productive work. However, I got lost in that in your pitch.
Got it.
And I was like, okay, hold on. The scraping, okay, does a backend developer need to build some sort of service or job that is scraping a website because that fuels some autocomplete or something like that or some version of their database? Being more granular and saying, hey, here's the set of tasks that we want developers not to have to do. Here's exactly the output of those tasks. And that's where our model comes into play. Because then I can kind of understand more vividly, okay, because if it was the other thing, that's also a much heavier technical challenge, right? Like an auto backend developer as an LM, I would have been like, hey, I'm skeptical. But something that's doing what you're talking about, I think I can have far more confidence
Makes
is
sense.
deliverable.
No, I think I agree. I think the challenge is always like how general or how technical do you be when you talk? Yeah, so it's finding that middle point, and I'm figuring that out. Yeah.
I'm curious, of these 3,000 developers, 5 million calls, is there sort of, you mentioned when you surveyed, the number one thing is scraping, but taking it a level deeper, sort of what do they fall into? What are the biggest buckets underneath, let's say, scraping? Is it what kinds of content, anything specific that you're sort of learning that? And part of the reason I'm wondering is, in order to be great at this, do you need to go deeper, not just wide to these 10 tasks, but do you need to go deeper to be able to really get perfect, outputs, no matter how complex system do you need to build so you can check mobile, application, whatever, is sort of other places you need to go that you're not there yet. And so the depth is maybe what I'm trying to get at.
No, agree 100%. So we do talk to a lot of our customers and we figure out there's a wide range of use cases for scraping. We have customers that use it for e-commerce comparisons to compare prices among different sites. We have customers.
Just to clarify though, he was asking beyond scraping. Is this mostly focused on scraping?
Well, no. I would ask specifically in scraping. So I'm saying you have to go deeper in scraping. So you're like, if I asked you to write an algorithm that pulls the price off a page, you'd probably get it right 99.8% of the time. But sometimes there may be a second price on the page and like somebody says to you, no, this is like life or death. So I'm going to scrape some content. It's got to be the heart rate of someone.
Exactly.
And you're like, okay, we got to focus on that specific area, which I know you're not HIPAA compliant yet, so that wouldn't be the case.
We actually do have a medical company using us, so even though we don't have a HIPAA license yet, but exactly that. So finding the right balance between how specific we want to get into that market, like we can build a scraper that's very specific to the healthcare industry, or how generic do we want to be. Finding that balance, it's the whole point, that developer experience, and that's why we kind of stopped at the SDK or the API layer, where we can give enough configurability to the engineer that they can configure it to the application that they need to. And that's why we want to stick at this API layer, allowing companies and developers to build applications around us specific for their use case, which it could be healthcare, it could be things. So we have one company that's using us for transcribing doctor-patient notes. So like an hour worth of audio transcribed in 20 seconds. And that's a use case. And then they take that information and then they write their own code that basically does other things beyond that. Exactly. So that's the typical journey that we see most people come to us. And typically the people that come to us are developers that assigned by their CEOs to be like, hey, find me a tool that solves this problem. And Jigsaw Stack will be there.
And you mentioned transcription as one, though. That one feels like one that maybe is more solved in broader, like LLM. So we're investors
foundational models like Whisper.
Yeah, and I mean, we're investors in a company called RC, and so they have a ton of open source models. So a lot of those will do transcription well. And so I'm curious about...
So we have the fastest and the most accurate transcription in the market right after Grok. So we use Whisper under the hood, Whisper 3 large, but we built our own we fine-tuned that specifically for our... So that's what we do, basically. We rely a lot on open source models like Whisper. Typically Whisper 3 large takes like 10 minutes to do 150 minutes of audio. We take 20 seconds. And that's the kind of output.
So that leads me to my question. I was going to ask, this foundational models, I always ask of the AI startups that are pitching lately. Foundational model improvements can cannibalize startups built on top of them. It sounds like you're fine-tuning often and not building your own models and saying, hey, okay, there's some good baseline to work off of. However, as these foundational models improve, there's a real risk, I think, to a lot of these companies that the foundational models get so good. We've even heard whispers of them being potentially one day so multimodal that they can put together an interface better than a rapper could interface on top of a model. Do you worry about the foundational models improving? Obviously, you're using them, and so part of your answer that I'll take away from you is, well, no, we put them back under the hood. There's the more existential, the bigger threat of, no, they're so good that no one needs the wrapper around it or the fine-tune around it.
So what I've seen, at least for the past 5 years, is like OpenAI and a bunch of Llama coming out, they do get better at language-focused tasks. Specifically, I've seen LLMs evolved, but I've not seen till today, at least, foundation models solving very specific backend tasks when it comes to OCR, for example. If you ask GPT-4 right now, even today, like the best model, ask it to do OCR on a government document that has tables and structures and whatever it is, it breaks so horribly. And I think it still has at least 10, 15 years of a gap period of that advancement required for a foundation model to catch up. I think by then, we will be building our own models to solve specifically those problems as well.
Yeah, and I will be honest, I worry a little bit less about this is like, we used to always ask this, what if Amazon does it? What if Google does it? Whatever. You can always, that's an easy way to pass on something. I think you have to be somewhat of an optimist. And so I think one of the things that you're touching on, though, is the experience for a developer. So one of our best areas of focus is at our fund is we've backed a lot of developer platforms, Crashlytics, Firebase, MongoDB, like early on in the seed rounds. And we've been a part of their journeys for years. And one of the things that we would recognize, you mentioned Stripe, I mentioned Twilio, both of which did an unbelievable job of wrapping something that existed in a way that developers were able to be 10, 100, maybe 1,000 times more effective. And at the end of the day, there's services to layer on top of that. Transcription, frankly, would have been the one going to the feedback pitch concept.
Yeah.
I'd probably, if I were you, I'd probably leave it out of my pitch.
Okay.
I think it's one that so many products are trying to touch on transcription in various ways. We're investors in a company called Talktastic. They also use Whisper.
Yeah.
It's like you go down this rabbit hole, this one thing that feels, I mean, the OpenAI ChatGPT app has, speak and it'll transcribe for you. You might do it better, you may do it faster, you may do it cheaper. I think it's one area where you would go down a rabbit hole with a lot of people and like they're just gonna say, so tell me how it's gonna be better and Whisper's better. And you're like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That isn't our point. We've solved 10 other things.
Yeah.
That happens to be one that developers need.
Exactly. Agree. No, I'll keep that in mind. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Good
Thank
job.
you.
Yeah. Thank you. That is really hard to do.
The 1 minute pitch.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I tell people all the time, though, if you get good at that, the thing that begins every single pitch is this moment in time to hook somebody, to hook an investor. And so you sit down with a VC, and even if you have a 20-minute, a 40-minute meeting, the challenge is how do you get them to understand that thematically there's something worth actually listening to? Because I think for a lot of people in that first 30 seconds, that first 60 seconds, you can essentially accidentally bucket yourself. It kind of happened with me and our friend here of like, oh, hold on, what's the back end that we're talking about here? Is it infrastructure? Or is it scripts? Is it one-off tasks? Is it something more fundamental to people's applications? And so getting good at the hook.
I totally agree. Creative storytelling, and there's one piece of advice I've given probably a couple hundred founders at this point. If you wanted an extracurricular that would also boost your pitch confidence and your ability to do this on stage or in a boardroom, take an improv class.
Yeah, 100%.
The yes and the being able to continue on to get people to keep moving forward. I think you wind up, we both mentioned this it might lead us the wrong way when we hear the pitch that way. You need to be able to recover from that. You did a very good job, but you need to find a way to do that in your pitch. And I absolutely agree, get the hook. But if somebody starts dragging you off in a direction you don't want to be, the worst thing you can do is be like, you're wrong. Like, you misheard me. You didn't, like, nobody wants to be told they're wrong. I don't care how wrong I am. I still don't want to be told I'm wrong. But you find a way to sort of navigate that in conversation.
I tell people in our context who are interviewing for jobs this all the time, you need to invite people back in who have tuned out, who have maybe been told or misunderstood exactly what's being talked about. How do you invite them back into the room so that they can ask clarifying questions or build their way back to being on that wagon with you? Well, with that, should welcome second founder up.
Yeah, let's do it.
Round of applause.
Hi, my name is Sai Nanduri.
Say it one more time. Your
Sai Nanduri.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
All right, Sai, so you have a minute to tell us what you're building, get some feedback. Are you ready?
Sure, I am.
What are you building?
Intella One, a Gen AI-powered one-stop platform where product marketing managers can create and organize all their marketing assets in minutes. Today, engineers have Jira, sales teams have Salesforce, but how about product marketing teams? They don't have a tool to help. They are cobbling together a bunch of different assets from a different tool set, different places, putting together something as simple as one-pagers, taking about half their work time to create custom one-pagers for each of their potential clients. Now, we are here to change the game, transform the game for product marketing managers using our tool called Intella One.
Under a minute, good job. I'm going to go right to the hardest question, but you might already have your default stock answer, but for products like this today, I just asked it of the last founder. Anything that's building in large language models, I worry about foundational models doing better with their iterations. Yes, you can always put it back under the hood, but there's this worry, or there should be, in my view, of large language models, this worry of foundational models getting so good they can even be better than the applied use case, the customized thing that exists. When you think about what you're building, how will foundational models not cannibalize it with their updates and their upgrades?
I think foundation models, definitely, they have a way to get there. I won't deny that. But I think having something tailored and custom specific, like I'm very specific with the niche here, which is product marketing managers. So having something very specific for them and having something which is trained on a large set of data. The data that we have currently is all PMM data. We are training on this specific data, which is why we stand out already. So we already have an MVP where we have tried comparing ourselves with someone like ChatGPT, like a foundational model, and we see that our GPT asks for better questions and better trains. And so I think better outcomes and outputs is what we are looking at end of the day.
And what do you think about as the most important inputs that you need from product marketing teams or their organizations? What I'd like to better understand is the sort of integration points. What do they need to subscribe to? What do they need to get their teams to do different than maybe they're doing today, if anything, in order to get these better outcomes, these better outputs?
Yeah, I love that question. That's a great one. So as of today, everyone is talking about customer obsession, right? Everyone wants to know about customers, wants to get deeper insights about who their customer truly is. And it's not a segment, it's not, a someone anymore. It's a lot of data points about each individual. So that is what we really want. That's the integration point we're looking for. So something like Salesforce would be great because we would know truly what the customers are looking into, what other things that they're doing already in the market, so that those data points is something that we would leverage in our platform to be able to create content, marketing material that's tailored to that particular audience.
And is the hope for it to be autonomous, or is the idea you mentioned your GPT responding better? Is it an assistant to the product marketing manager?
Copilot.
Like, hey, I'd like this thing to come out. Great, I need this input or whatever. Or do you ultimately want to replace some portion of their role? We think about AI as not replacing people, but replacing like tasks within. Sometimes those tasks make up a
Job
whole
descriptions,
job.
yeah.
Exactly. I think it's about replacing the tasks and not the people.
Yeah.
Because end of the day, we people are here to leverage AI and then get the best out of it. But we're not going to.
Why is that your answer? Let me say, a lot of founders who got up on the stage and asked that question answer that way. It's like, no, we will protect the person.
Yeah.
People will find other job descriptions to write. As AI replaces some job descriptions, other job descriptions will be written. And so let me push you as I pushed someone who's building for product managers. I'm a product person by background. PMM is close in kinship to product people, so I feel like I understand it well. And there was someone building for product managers who hesitated too to say like, no, I want to replace the PM. And my feedback on the pitch, and same feedback for you, if you're going to tackle something like this, my belief is you have to tell a grand narrative as what you think PMMing is going to look like in 10 years.
Yeah.
What is the product marketer, if they exist, going to look like in 10 years? Or what does product marketing as a function look like in 10 years? And I think it needs to look materially different if you're going to actually make the impact that you're talking about and take that big swing, right? And so if that's your answer because you kind of feel it as an individual and because you want those people to use your product today, I encourage you to maybe trust your potential customers a little bit more to use you in the in-between as they get replaced. But is that why you're answering that way? Or is there another reason you think PMMs might still exist in 5 years?
Yeah, I think the PMM piece is so complex that it can't really be replaced by one tool, even if that's AI. What I believe is, there could be a future where we are using all these tools, but then when it's marketing, I think there's some component of emotional aspects as well. So the tool can tell you so much in terms of data points, something about the customer, something very specific to a target audience and things like that. But if you're not able to, let's say, for lack of a better word, I want to say validate everything that's being said. And then, if you're not able to get that together to now deliver to your target audience, then I think there's a missing piece there. I believe so.
I tend to agree with your feedback. It's not always the case. So I also would say, your category better than I do. I think, you mentioned something earlier about this hook. I think one of the things I would say is when you're pitching for me, I think helping me to better understand what the PMM role that you're describing is doing today, what systems they're working with, who they're working with, what their outputs are beyond the one pager, but sort of what do they ask to do, how often, how frequent, just would go a long way in sort of helping me to understand how different the world will look in your future versus without what you're developing. You may be right. Maybe the future of this role goes away entirely, but if you don't believe that, that's okay. But like, help me to understand sort of what exists after that and what they're changing today, I think is a big thing. We have multiple companies who are building products that, the founder is behind closed doors would say, yeah, I just don't think this industry is going to look anything like it does. This role won't exist. So we're going to completely replace it with automation and AI. But they're currently selling to an audience that needs to believe they're going to exist.
Yeah,
in that
and
role.
separating, especially if you're talking to investors, and I know there's like a fine line, especially there's a crowd here. But
You're like live streaming this.
Yeah,
So it's
well, there's like the message you want to give to marketers, so you want to use the product. But I would say too, to investors, it's almost the opposite problem. When you say the role might still exist, my brain goes, she's not going to go hard enough, right? If you build a roadmap that aims to replace PMMs, I would bet on that roadmap more than I'd bet on the one that aims to help them and support them.
Well, and I would maybe think about it a little differently if I'm giving that same pitch, which is there's a ceiling to value that you can get. If you are a tool for PMMs, there's some amount of you use Salesforce for salespeople. It's $200, $300 a month. That's your ceiling. LinkedIn Premium, $9.99 a month, right? That's your ceiling for recruiters. If you replaced a $60, $80, $120,000 a year job or 2 or 3 or 10, maybe you're extracting $400,000, $500,000. So you're still saving a company a lot of money. So again, even if you don't necessarily believe it goes all the way here, I think helping me to understand how you unlock that much value within your customer segment is going to be important.
I want to zoom in a little bit from here, if you don't mind, because I want to hear more about the product experience. I often tell founders I want to hear more about the UX, because I think one of the things here is we've been very abstract. I think part of that is because your pitch stayed up here. Whereas if you told us more about how it felt to use the product as the last 10, 15 seconds of, so PMM today comes to Intello1 and blank, blank, blank happens. What is some of that blank, blank, blank?
Oh, great. Thanks for asking that. I think I almost blanked out. So thank you for the blank. So yeah, with Intello1, you're able to create end-to-end marketing campaigns. So with our platform, you're able to see and track the impact of the campaigns that you create end-to-end campaigns. And you don't have to go to all these multiple tools. Like today you go to Canva, you go to some other tool, some other Gen AI powered tool, like HubSpot, every other place, you gather a bunch of different things and then put together something like a one-pager. Now send it out to your sales team who's then trying to drive efficiencies off of these marketing campaigns. Now, instead, like imagine that one hub, like a central hub, like that's
Is that because you're heavily integrated with all those tools?
Heavily integrated. Plus, I'm also saying that I want to cut down that context switching. Like right now, I think the problem that I see is that there's so much context switching, and then they're asked to fit to a tool like Jira or Salesforce, which is not meant for them really. So what I'm trying to do is build something for PMMs where this is their central hub, and it's not a Google Drive per se, just to store your documents. It's somewhere where you can leverage Gen AI, create your documents, customize them, and then deliver right from there to whichever team needs them.
Well, the reason I ask is because I think there's two versions of the product as it is happening in my head. One of which is, and this would change what sort of company you're building, the one that wants to be heavily integrated and allow you to execute the marketing campaign from Intello1 would have to be heavily integrated, would have a challenge integrating in some of those cases with a lot of these marketing tools and saying, okay, that's what we're going to solve. But by the way, that would also be your moat, right? You'd say, why won't foundational model companies be as good? Well, because we're going to build all the integrations into marketing and sales and project management tools such that that's not going to be as easy or as fast. Or the other version of what you're building is easier to build, right? So if you say, actually, I don't want to integrate with all of these tools, but instead I want the PMM to drive from here all the deliverables they send to other teams, then I go, okay, easier to build. I'm a little worried on the delivery part and like, again, the deprecation through foundational models. But then I understand, oh, what she's really thinking about is the life of a PMM, right? In one case, you're thinking about the results of a PMM. I want to be integrated. I want to automate. I want to make them able to execute from Intello1. The other thing about the life of a PMM, and those are two compelling products both, right? So be sure to be very definitional about which one you're building. And I think a lot of people, for example, wouldn't invest in one or the other. Right? They're going to say, okay, I do want the Copilot. I do want the thing that improves the user experience of the individual, versus the other person's going to go, no, I think all of these tasks should be AI'd.
Yeah, replaced. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's very helpful. In fact, to be honest with you, one more thing that happened is when we tried to interact with users, so now PMMs have to be our users, right? We want PMMs, we want them to onboard. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest reasons why I cannot say that this will replace them.
I do think it's such a challenge that I hear founders, obviously the feedback loop telling me so often. And I wonder if there's some other solution that maybe the three of us don't have today. I just like put that out into the world. I think we have to be able to talk about this. It goes to what we should be able to do in society, not to make this about society, but society should be able to have this conversation of here's the inevitabilities, right? No one's stopping this train. This train is coming. Large language models will eat everything. And we are going to be victim to that in some ways, and in some ways we're going to take advantage. And so part of me just wants there to be a way for you to say it and for us to also say that about other things that AI will do to our society. So I'll put that into the world and say thank you for sharing and good luck with it. Sounds promising.
Thank you so much.
I want to switch gears here for a second to talk about a WeWork story, an anecdote I have. This was post your WeWork time.
Oh, thank goodness.
So in 2019, we started a free agency, which is Hollywood-style representation for tech talent. So think a talent agent, but for a VP of product or senior software engineer. And we hadn't launched yet, but WeWork was going through phase one of like its crumble in 2019. And so we wanted, as that was happening, there were a lot of layoffs happening and quits happening. We wanted to target those individuals. Free agency brand wasn't around yet other than a vague landing page. So we created a website called WeWorkElsewhere.com. And we were the only ones.
My Google alerts still go off to this day.
Did you see WeWork Elsewhere?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So here's the funny part about it. We were the only ones, to my knowledge, advertising on LinkedIn against WeWork employees other than WeWork itself. And the notion of essentially targeting these individuals during this time. So the page said, hey, you're working at WeWork right now. Are you looking to work elsewhere? Blah, 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 blah. We called our law firm. We got the cease and desist that was inevitable from WeWork itself. We called our law firm. They said, hey, we're what's the word when you have a client and conflicted out? We're conflicted out, but just change the name. So we went from WeWorkElsewhere.com to WeWorkin Elsewhere, and that solved the legal promise trouble. But the notion of the routing, the storytelling we did in that moment of saying, hey, there's something to where you work today, where you might want some optionality about where you work tomorrow. And WeWork was a great place for a lot of people for a long time. Really hit with people and drew them in to the point where I heard several years later that people were upset with me, who I obviously hadn't met or don't know, about WeWorkElsewhere.com. And I think this is like an underrated thing for startups to do. Find a moment in time, because I remember what happened next is there's Airtable of our clients over the years, past 5 years, we've had close to 1,000 clients. There's a segment of like 40 or 50 that are just a bunch, like why did this happen because of this campaign? But they're just WeWork employees.
Yeah, no,
and
sure.
It created an inflection point of business for us. It created a moment for us to learn all at once, to see how our message landed without having to launch free agency as a whole, which we did about 6 months later. But I bring that all to say, what did you feel about WeWork Elsewhere when you heard about it?
Look, I was one of the first executives at WeWork one of the first founding team, early team members to leave WeWork. And it was sort of a public thing. It was the first time that we ever internally wrote, we did a press release. We had a town hall style thing where we talked about it. We sent an email to all the employees. And part of the reason is that out of our first 1,000 employees, I had hired either very directly or quite close to directly, 300 plus of them in various groups that I run. New markets we were going in, sales team, IT organization, technology. And so when I was leaving, there was a bit of fear that, it would cause people to say, oh, wait, if Jesse's leaving, it was a bit like, if Miguel left, and it was a bit like if Kyle O'Keefe Sally, who was an early WeWork guy, if Kyle left, is Miguel's brother, so that would have mattered a lot. And so I think because of that, what wound up happening is over the years, I would field a lot of those calls. So frankly, this was a nice outlet other than people calling me and saying, what should I do with my job now? Non-competes are ridiculous.
Right.
And obviously becoming outlawed, but they're ridiculous. I think people should, as the saying went at WeWork, you should do what you love.
Right.
And if what you love is not working at WeWork anymore, you shouldn't be there. And that's the case for any company. And so as I thought about, this moment, to be frank, I hadn't thought about it until you just brought it up and sort of seeing the alert on Google Alerts. But it's a good idea to remind people that their job is not their only part of their identity. It was really hard when I left, for me personally, to separate out the WeWork and what was I outside of WeWork. And it became extremely hard in 2019 and 2020 when WeWork was starting to collapse. And all of a sudden, not only had I removed myself from the business, so all of a sudden this 7 years of my life had been sort of in that part of my identity. But now that part of my identity was like being falling apart
a little bit.
Yeah, and I'd have people all the time. I had LPs, their investors in me and my fund would come to me and we'd spend an entire hour talking about what were the lessons I learned and what did I think about Adam? What did I think about WeWork in that moment? And I was like, that's not what I do now. Like, can we talk about something else? Can we move on? I've gotten very comfortable talking about it at this point, but there was a period of time. And so I think to give employees an outlet to tell them there's another path, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think there's some coy or crass ways to do it. And that's a great idea and great for marketing for you. But we definitely should do more. I will take this back to some of our larger investments at this point, later stage companies. I think they should do more to help people find their next thing if it's not for them anymore. I invested in a company 7 years ago in the music tech industry. One of the first employees that had been hired there was the guy who introduced the company to us. And the first meeting I had with him after I invested was they said, I see your role, I see you. I'm like, in the next 3 or 4 years, there's not going to be a role for you here. And I'm not saying it as like a board member and I'm going to let go of you. I'm saying I've been in your seat. There's going to be a point where it outgrows you and you're going to be sitting there saying, what do I do? And I said, if that point comes, I was like, call me.
Open conversation.
I said, call me. I said, don't think to yourself, oh my God, I'm leaving the company. I can't believe what I'm going to do. How could I tell anybody this? What about all that part of my life? And so I just think we should find ways to do more. That obviously is not scalable. I can't field every call from every ex-WeWorker, but I try and field as many as I can.
Well, so I just want to go back to something you said in there that I think is so important too, about your kind of experience of WeWork as well. I appreciate you saying that, and I agree with you obviously on the career side. And I think people knowing their optionality is key, which also allows them to embrace a lot of things too, which is I think another part of this, to your point about people experiencing WeWork and in hindsight, okay, what was that and the identity being tied in? Two things can be true in that scenario. Startups like WeWork need that. To do the things that they do at the time that they do it. And it's not only for everybody, it's not for everybody, and it's not for everybody all the time. Even the people who are there during some of the key moments. And I think if we had a better understanding, a way to talk about that, and a way to understand companies like WeWork and the experiences they go through and why some of that's required. Paul Graham just posted founder mode, talking about the motion of startup for founders.
Don't worry, I did tweet the words founder mode out because that's what's required of me as a VC.
Everyone has to, right? Exactly.
I didn't say anything else.
Who's read founder mode in the crowd? Oh, decent chunk. Awesome. For those who haven't, Paul Graham, founder of Y Combinator, posted about what's required of founders to build generational companies. And I think it's also, what he's talking about there isn't about teams, but there's something there to be written about teams as well behind them. And so even thinking about that experience, again, the same way I talked about, there's few people like Adam who can do X. And there are a few people like the team at WeWork who can do Y. And I think all of that, if we could have those thoughts in our head while also saying not for everybody and not for everybody all the time, much better for everybody.
We were a very young team, very few children, very few people had children. There weren't any children in the team.
There were some children,
there
but
were
not
very
that many
few children on the team. We did have a couple of interns early on, but no, I would say it was a different time in my life and our team's life, and so there is just a difference in the way you operate, and you can build massive companies. I think the average age of $1 billion plus company founders is actually quite high compared to what I think people think the average age of the founder was when they founded the company. But you work differently. That is true.
With that, shall we welcome founder number 3 to the stage?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Round of applause. Okay, awesome. Say your name into that mic.
I'm Christopher Chong.
Are you ready to tell us about your building and get some feedback?
Yes, sir.
Christopher, you have a minute. What are you building?
Sorry. I'm pretty sure everyone here has ordered some packages in the past, and you've probably wondered, is it even going to be at my front door by the time I get home? Well, the entire country of America has this problem, and that's why I started Avic Security. We build package security solutions, starting with our lockbox, the parcel pod. Unlike other lockboxes, our parcel pod does not use a physical lock and key mechanism or some type of pin pad. Instead, we have a simple barcode scanner. You see, delivery drivers don't get paid based on the amount of hours they work. They get paid based on the amount of packages they deliver. So, by utilizing the tracking numbers that are available on every single package that ever gets delivered, we get to streamline the delivery process so that delivery drivers actually use the lockboxes. That's so unlike the remote locker systems where you have to get out of your way to go get your package, or the doorbell cameras where you could watch your packages get stolen. We keep your packages safe right at your doorstep.
That's a minute. I have a lot of questions.
I want to ask you to go like maybe 30 more seconds into the product experience in the first product. What happens? So I live here in New York City. Don't know if it's possible to use it, but I like to use it. What happens? They walk up. They see this box there they've never seen before. What do?
Right. So, I mean, since New York is diverse, including the buildings, right? Assuming that you live somewhere around Queens or Brooklyn, you would have our lockbox in front of your front door, just either anchored down or chained to a fence or something like that. A delivery driver walks up to your front door, scans it like a Target self-checkout with the barcode scanner that's on your package, and it just opens up, they drop it off, they go. The entire process is almost as fast as dropping it off on the floor in the first place. And that's...
Is there any compliance or other weird employment issue with them like having to scan something like this? I say this to say like the delivery driver, I don't know if this is why you were asking, but like there's the sense to which they have to participate in this, right? And so are they by their nature allowed to participate in any sort of Dropbox they see as a driver?
Right. So you're talking about like the legal complications and so on, right?
We worry about that. We worry about
The hand started to wave. Did you see the hand?
Seed problem.
we hire lawyers for that. No.
Yeah.
So technically, when you order something, usually you can add in a note saying like, okay, can you drop this package off at the lobby or press this number at the front door? Usually it's the same process. It's like, wave the box with the barcode in front of the scanner or in front of this lockbox and just drop it inside. It's basically the same thing like that. And I'd say the only issues with the lockbox is getting your landlord to allow it.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure that's something a landlord would be looking into in the first place.
Yeah. One more question before I give it to Jesse for some feedback. Question: can this do returns?
I'm sorry?
Can this do returns? Can we use this to somehow solve package returns? One of my pet peeves in life is I feel like we haven't solved returns. Your answer to this can just be no. Like it sounds like a lockbox could do something, in the area of returns.
No, until later. Maybe.
No, until later. Maybe it was the answer.
I like it.
It was succinct.
Yeah.
Albeit mystical. I think it's a really interesting idea and concept. I'm curious to hear a little bit about how you view the business model, how you view the sort of overall business, sort of what is the plan for this thing? And part of what I'm asking is how big is this problem in the way that you're solving it? Like I know broadly it's a big problem. A lot of packages shipped, a lot of packages lost. I've had many lost. But if you're asking me or my landlord to spend hundreds of dollars and pay a subscription fee, like you have to do with your mattress now and the heated car seats, like all of a sudden it maybe shrinks the market. And so I'm just curious about sort of business model and business plan.
So that's a couple questions there, but I can work backwards.
I wasn't told I wasn't allowed to stack questions.
It's okay. I think I have the list in my mind. Right. So starting with how big the market is, right? Technically, there is no market right now because there is no product. Well, there's no well-known product that's popular that actually works right now. Besides, if you consider doorbell cameras.
Yeah, I was gonna say Ring Cam is probably the closest.
Yeah. But I mean, watching your packages get stolen is not the same as keeping it safe.
It makes you feel a lot worse.
Yeah, I can throw a couple numbers at you real quick. In just the last year, over $8 billion in packages were stolen. So that's a lot of money, but not for the type of people you think. It's not for your regular consumers, or at least the majority of it. The majority of it is lost by the companies. So like Amazon, FedEx, and so on. Because when you get your packages stolen, you call them up, they send you a refund, right? That money's coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we plan on going B2B in the future, but we have to set the foundation to make this system work. And that's why we're selling B2C with these lockboxes first.
How would you go B2B though?
So we are planning on, when we have enough of a customer base, we plan on selling insurances to these companies saying, hey, we have these lockboxes. With these customers that you're delivering to, we'll charge you, or we're hoping to charge these people, insurances in the hopes of, making sure that the package doesn't get stolen.
So something interesting is coming out for me. So I like his question and where your answer was headed, because there's essentially what he's asking is, where's the incentive alignment, right? We can imagine the product experience, but he's saying, okay, who's in pain right now, and how are you going to extract capital from them as part of your solution? I don't like this answer so much. And what I'd encourage you to think about is like answering in incentives instead when you're this early, because as soon as you said B2B, you like made my brain take a hard left turn of like, wait, how? And then this insurance thing is complicated and a weird business model. And so suddenly I'm like challenged by insurance, and I don't want to be challenged by insurance. I mean, how early stage are you? Are you?
So we are pre-seed, and we are
Has it launched at all?
Not launched.
So see, in this moment, don't give me future obstacles. And it goes to like this idea of answer in the broad. My philosophies of incentive, here's who I think has, kind of a desire to align with us. And that, by the way, again, the insight you started with was super interesting, because I hadn't thought of the Amazons and all these random D2C companies that probably have to do, they probably lose tons of their margin to returns or refunds. And so if you said that and you said, well, and here's the 4 ways I might experiment aligning with them, but I'm still early, that's, I think, a better answer than this specific answer that is a little bit strange compared to the rest of the use case. So maybe stay in the philosophy of what you might do in this case versus this particular set of answers. Related though, an idea that is stupid, but I just want to like put it out there. Like,
No idea.
why not just put a bunch of...
No, it's not true. There are stupid ideas. I'm sorry.
Okay. The majority of ideas.
Why don't you try to... No, this might be stupid. This might be really stupid, in fact. But like, your eventual go-to-market challenge is going to be getting the boxes into these locations. I wonder if there's a way to get like sponsorship of the boxes from these companies, right? Because they're going to want, if it's true that it reduces the amount of theft, an Amazon or a delivery company or even a D2C company might go, hey, how can I, add some mechanism of sponsoring that these things exist in the world? And whether that also involves literal ads could be interesting. It's physical real estate.
Yeah.
That could be a really interesting business model. Just an idea for you.
Like, put a sticker wrap on our lockboxes with Amazon's name on it.
Honestly, that'd be pretty cool.
So coming back to the question for you, how are you, if you were showing a slide up here, how would you talk about the market size today? You'd talk about the $8 billion in packages lost and the refunds. Is that sort of how you think about that's the market you're playing in, or just...
So because it's a emerging market and there's no numbers, that is I'm going with the $8 billion like being lost every single year, and like the customer or the people, the victims of it. And when it comes to this market, it's hard to tell, because I know that other companies are trying their own ways of solving this problem, right? Amazon has multiple different solutions, their remote locker systems, the Amazon Key, and other startups are doing their own things. But at the end of the day, because it's not exactly a mainstream, there's no mainstream products that you see while walking outside in the streets. We can't really tell how big the market size is, but I can tell you that there is a lot of money to be saved. And because there's money to be saved, there's more money to be made. You
said you're starting with consumers. Is there somebody on your team, we didn't get into your background, but is there somebody on your team or you that's done consumer products before, direct to consumer?
Yes. So one of my CTO, he worked on a dropshipping company, or he worked on his own dropshipping company back in college. And I think he started at the end of high school. So he knows about like reaching the audience, and he knows about how to handle customer service.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
But not consumer marketing, like on your team. Like if you want to sell 100,000 of these, is there somebody on your team who like,
you mean like reaching the audience?
Yeah.
Yes. I have a CMO on my team, also a college friend. She does a lot of internet or social media influencing. So she, by using her experiences in posting on social media, such as TikTok and Instagram, she's using those skills to help propagate our name out there and reach our audience.
One of the jobs you have as an early stage founder when you're pitching is to educate me enough to want to continue to think about this. And sometimes you can assume I know something about it, sometimes you can't. And there's a way to do it in a tactful way where you don't have to treat me like a dummy, but but to still get the message across. And I think in this business, it would be okay for you to think about the first step is getting 100,000 of these out there, let's say, or 10,000, pick a number that you want. Having somebody on the team who knows how they're going to reach people and to do the very simple math for me. Like, I don't know what the price point is. We didn't talk about it for consumer, but there's a company I backed called Squire back 11, 12 years ago now. Their pitch was a platform to find barbers. And my simple math that I did before I invested was like, what percentage of adult men in America are not bald, and would each one pay $1 to like be able to book their haircut? Because that was the original pitch. Your beard, right? So I didn't include you in this number. And I was like, okay, it's about like 150 million men, and each one pay $1. I get my haircut 6 times a year. Cool. That's like $1 billion in your revenue, almost. Like, that's a big enough business. Like, forget about any of the other stuff, the $8 billion of lost money, the sponsorship, all that. And so I would think about sort of early on in the pitch, if you can help me to understand how you might sell 10,000 of these or 100, whatever your number is.
And I bet you could use homes with a Ring camera as a proxy, or a Ring equivalent.
Yeah.
And you can also do like a roll-up number on apartments with a Ring camera. Can't necessarily have the device, but the apartment building could have the device.
Yeah.
So there's some analogy there.
So you're talking about like a TAM, SAM, SOM, just like thinking about how big the market size without the losses.
It's both
right?
market size, but it's also order of operations. So forgetting, like, I don't need to believe that you are going to necessarily build an insurance product if you think you could sell 1 million of these in the next 5 to 8 years, direct to consumer, $299 a pop, for less money, a small subscription fee, whatever. Like, give me the sort of building blocks of how you get there is more what I'm getting at. Then in that case, I worry less about the market size, right? Then you can say, and in the future, there's $8 billion of products lost and refunds we could tap. We think we can get money out of Amazon and out of Wayfair and all these companies. But like, hey, before we get there, we're gonna build a huge business. There's something big.
Okay, so I see what you mean.
Christopher, thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate it. Well done.
I appreciate being here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Physical businesses are interesting, and you're an expert, having done WeWork for a while.
I hate them. No, I don't.
Yeah, well,
so
it's interesting because like you have a very B2B thesis to Flybridge.
Yeah. But I have more of a B2C lean as an individual. So my 3 partners and I invest a little differently. I can say that if I look across my portfolio of venture and angel, my consumer-ish companies, the bucket I put them in, have outperformed the B2B companies.
So what's the kind of like the physicality lesson you've learned? Why do some, maybe your consumer companies, by the way, don't fall in this category.
Yeah, they don't.
But okay, so maybe your lesson is they can't work. But I often think like WeWorks of the world and other startups that have a physical element, real world element to them, you have to, as a founder, kind of be crazy, believe something wild to think they can work. They're just so much harder than, or not maybe so much harder. There's some parts of it that are easier, but they have a weird dynamic to them.
Yeah, I mean, the math is they trade at lower multiples because they don't scale as well, right? And the margins can only expand so much. So if you have a physical item or a physical piece of space, like the reason that 8 Sleep charges a subscription is because if they want to be a massive business, they have to. It's not because it costs a ton of money to process your sleep data. It does cost money, but they sell a few $1,000 mattress. Like, it's not.
The Casper S1 did not go well, and 8 Sleep has learned from that lesson.
Yeah, they have their own business, their own thing. But I would just say, when I see companies that are pitching, I want them to be mindful of what does the actual market look like and what does the ultimate model get valued on. Like, I go back to this point about educating investors. One of your goals as a founder, or any pitch in a sales context too, is to almost lead me to the questions that you want me to ask. So help me understand what I should be asking of your business. So if you're going to go and build a new WeWork, for instance, the model of WeWork originally was take a piece of real estate in a good location, but not the most expensive building, chop it up, put up glass walls, offer free beer and coffee, put an employee in there, and sell it for 3 times per square foot. That is a good business model. Like, just to be clear, it makes money. And it can be profitable from day one, depending on how you charge. If you charge a year up front.
The challenge of the business then becomes...
Yeah, the challenge of business is you need dollar for dollar to build space. That is your business. If you want to be a $1 billion company and REITs trade at 2x their revenue, you need $500 million of revenue. Like, it's really easy math to do. And so these physical businesses, if you have a physical product, you have the same challenge. You've got a limited margin. You're only ever going to get so much out of that. You can only sell so many widgets or so many items. That may be a big enough business to back anyway, but you need to help me understand how big that opportunity is. you.